here. My name's Matthew. I'm the pastor here, or the lead pastor, one of the pastors. It's great to have you here. I'm going to talk for the next few minutes. We're actually wrapping up today a series we've been in for the last 6 weeks, or this is week 6, called Transforming Relationships. So we've been looking at the whole subject of relationships, and particularly looking at the issue of vulnerability. We've been saying how maybe what we have to offer in the context of relationships, what we can give and what we can receive, is not so much strength or knowledge or great wisdom or all those things which, if we have them, that's great, but it's usually a matter of opinion whether we have them or not, I guess. But perhaps the greatest thing we can give is vulnerability. Give ourselves to be open and honest and real, and invite others into that same kind of dynamic where they can be safe to be real and open and honest themselves. So we've been talking over the last few weeks about things like accepting ourselves, loving ourselves. We've talked about being safe people who don't judge others and create an atmosphere in which others can be open. We've talked about listening compassionately and empathetically. And then last week we were also talking about challenging ourselves and supporting and walking with other people in the challenges that they're facing, and kind of really owning that with them and being partners with them in that challenge. You may remember the last couple of weeks I've had my youngest son, Oliver, up here. He's 15. He's not going to be up here today. He's over with the high school guys in the barn, but he's been up, and I've had quite a bit of feedback from various people that they really appreciated what he had to share, his openness, his honesty. And what an amazing guy he is. And he is an amazing guy. He really is an amazing guy. But I'm going to tell you another little story about Ollie, a brief one. This morning, as we wrap the series up, I wanted to talk about a picture or a painting that is very significant to us, to our family. Significant to me. All of us, really. And this is a painting that this is a painting that's from our front room. We have this on display on our house. And Oliver, I think it was last Sunday, wasn't it? I think it was last Sunday. He said, "What's up with that painting? It's just a bunch of purple and green stripes." So, which shows to me that he can be, Ollie can be very in touch with his feelings and that kind of thing. But he can also be a 15-year-old Philistine, right? At the same time. But the point is, this picture has a story behind it. And I wanted to just share a little bit about that story to illustrate a point that I'll make in a few moments. And the story actually involves Oliver. It is a painting of green and purple and blue stripes, that's for sure. But the story that it tells is a story from about 10 years ago. Actually, the painting was painted 10 years ago, in 2004, by a good friend of ours who lives where we used to live in England, in the city of Exeter, which is in the southwest of England. And it's a painting of a place called Dartmoor. And Dartmoor is this very unique landscape in the southwest of England. It's a national park. To sort of get it in context, though, national parks in the UK are not on the same kind of size or scale as they would be in the UK. So Dartmoor might only be as big as, or smaller than Montgomery County, perhaps. It's something like that. But it's a beautiful place, and I actually have a few photos of it that we're going to show. So it's this landscape where it's very close to where we used to live, and it's this very prehistoric landscape. So it's kind of upland moors, granite stone, that dating back about 350 million years. So it's interesting actually. Geology really kind of, I think, puts to rest the European snobbery about things being old, right? How Europeans are always saying, your White House isn't old, especially since we burned it down once, so it had to be rebuilt. Westminster Abbey is old, that's 500 years old, or the, something like the needle of Cleopatra's needle, I think that was 1500 BC, that sits on the north bank of the Thames. Except that, really, it's from Egypt. We stole it and brought it over to England, so that's another way we've got to get old stuff. But geology puts all that into those kind of time frames, pale into significance. Those stones are 350 million years old. So there's this very kind of eerie, remote, prehistoric landscape. And this painting is actually a painting about a walk that we took on this moor, on Dartmoor. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about it. So you had these rocky, breakthrough rocks through the grass, wild ponies. There's also other animals that farmed. You know, farmers would take the cattle and sheep on to graze on the moorland as well. So you have other animals there, and there's some, you know, interesting wildlife. Maybe we can just keep going through these. Some of the stones look like they've been piled on top of each other, but actually that's just the way they've weathered. It's, you know, I know you have some of that over here too. It's kind of bizarre. You would think somebody put that together, but if we go on, there are also that wasn't accidental. That was put together. That was a bridge where the stones are used, you know, to I guess keep the landscape natural. Other stones have these ancient pagan stones, stone circles, standing stones, which again reflect this sort of mysterious, eerie, there's lots of spooky stories about this region. There's some religion there as well, so you see that cross. And you get a picture there of the heather, okay? So you know, in this painting here, we have the traditional slate grey English sky, which, you know, the sun does come out in England, but, you know, we're sort of renowned for that grey sky. The heather and the grass of the moors. So, you know, you can sort of get this picture has this atmosphere. We'll talk more about that in a moment. That is very significant. This sort of religion, you know, more recently, Christian churches built on the moor on certain significant spots. But it has this very strange kind of feel about it, a very rugged, austere beauty to it. That's what something called a tor. So where these rocks break through and form points on higher ground, they're known as tors. And I remember when we were there, George, my youngest son, the second youngest son, he was, he would have been, what, 6 or 7, and I managed to persuade him that was Amon Sul, you know, the Weathertop, the place where Frodo got stabbed by the Witch King of Angmar. And he believed me, because it really has that Middle-earth kind of feel about it. There's forests there. I mean, does that look like Fangorn Forest or what? I mean, that's, you know, there are these dense forests where that just suddenly appear, and you walk through those. We can keep going. But then, we'll look at the last one. Gorse bushes, and that is perhaps a typical shot of what this landscape's like. Okay, so I've sort of painted a picture of Dartmoor. Now, 11 years ago, so it was January 2003, we went on a walk. We've been on many walks on Dartmoor. Okay, we're very familiar with Dartmoor. This was one of the first walks we took, and we went with my family. So Oliver, to give you some context, would have been about, he had just turned 4. And then I have 4 kids, and they're all sort of 2 to 3 years spaced apart. So I guess our oldest one would have been about 11. Megan would have been about 11. Now Megan has type 1 diabetes, so she has insulin-dependent diabetes. So she kind of always has to have a bit of food on her, especially back then when she wasn't so well controlled, in case she goes really low, you know, has a low blood sugar. So yeah, we have to sort of bear that in mind. My parents were also with us. They were in their 70s. My dad has an artificial knee, kind of not so mobile as he's been getting older. We also went with our friends, the woman who painted this picture, her husband, and their relatively newborn baby of 4 months, about 4 months old. So we were kind of sort of a vulnerable group in some respects. So we chose a nice, easy walk. We had this book, and it said, couple of hours, light stroll kind of thing. And it was about 11:30, so we had a few snacks, not many, but we thought we'll go for this walk, and then we'll have a late lunch, be home by mid-afternoon, everybody's happy. It didn't really work out that way. Let me just begin at the end and say, we didn't get home until the early hours of the morning. The walk took us, rather than 2 hours, took us probably close to 12 hours. Right? It was a bit of a problem. So we realized there was a problem after the first 2 hours when we looked at the map. And this is before GPS and smartphones and all those kind of things. And plus you don't get any reception out on the moor. We realized after about 2 hours that we were only an eighth of the way around the walk. But you know how it is when you kind of, well, maybe this first part just took a bit longer, so let's keep going. You know, let's not turn back, because that's going to be another 2 hours, and they said the whole thing was going to be 2 hours. So we just kept going, and then we just kept going for the whole rest of the day. And it started to rain. This was January. It gets pretty cold, and this is, I mean, it's not really high, but relatively high up. Started getting cold. The baby started getting a little bit antsy. Megan's blood sugar started going down, and we'd eaten all our snacks in the first 2 hours, so we had no more food. The place is full of bogs, In fact, has anybody ever read Hound of the Baskervilles? Read Hound of the Baskervilles? Great book. Well, that Sherlock Holmes book is set on Dartmoor. The Baskerville Hall is fictitious, but it's set on Dartmoor. And the Great Grimpen Mire, if you remember from the story, the Great Grimpen Mire, is again, fictitious, but based on one of these Dartmoor bogs. Well, we walked through something that we rapidly realised was something like a bog. But again, it was sort of, oh, wait, it's a bit wet, but we'll be all right, let's keep going, until we were, ankle to shin deep in mud. And then my mother fell over. Flat back, yeah. Well, except what do you do when your mother falls over, into the mud? You laugh, right? I mean, none of us, and she was caked in mud. She was just caked, all the back, so basically she was clean on the front, and then if you turn around, it was just all mud. And it was just one thing after another. Incidentally, it started getting darker and more spooky. The 1994 Quidditch World Cup was played on Dartmoor, according to J.K. Rowling. Okay, so it has this sort of, this fantastical connotations. As the sun starts going down, it definitely gets very spooky. There's cows around. We encountered some bulls. It got to 10 o'clock at night, right? And we eventually thought, we may have to stay out here. We may have to camp, because it was so dark, we had no lights. The cell phones were not smartphones with torches on, or flashlights on. We could have done with some torches, those kind of things. And so we were trying to read the map with the last glimmering light from our cell phones, and we didn't really know where we were. There was patchy cell phone reception, so we managed, to our shame, to call the police. Call the emergency number, because people are known to be rescued off Dartmoor. But you always think, that's not going to be us. We're not going to be that stupid. So we were like, it's the last resort, because we were worried about Meg, we were worried about my parents. We thought we're going to have to camp out. We had nothing, no shelter. Ollie and I actually, a few months ago, went on one of those fire making, workshops. But I didn't have those skills back then, And so, we weren't going to be able to build a fire or anything like that. So we called the police, and they managed to somehow work out where we were. We described things to them, and they said, "You've got to get to Heaven's Gate." Right? I mean, that was the destination. This plane was a gate, and we were like, "Is this the police, or what is this?" And they said, "You've got to get to Heaven's Gate. If you make it to Heaven's Gate, there's a road there, and you take that road, you turn left, go down, and then you'll see a pub, and then you'll be safe." And so the next hour was us trying to find Heaven's Gate. And we were looking at, and we eventually found some signs. We put our cell phone up on this wooden sign that said, "Heaven's Gate this way." And we thought we're either going to end up in somebody's barn and never be seen again, or we'll make it to the road. And eventually we made it to the road. Anyway, all that to say, it was this amazing experience, right? It was an incredible experience. And she painted this painting several months later, gave it to me actually. Lisa sort of commissioned her to do it for my birthday the following year, so I got it in the following year. And what she's done here, you can come and look at this afterwards, and it's not going to end up in the Tate Gallery in London or anything like that, but it's a beautiful painting, but it means so much to us. It's actually painted on a map of Dartmoor, so she's painted it on a map. And then she smudged the paint away on significant locations that were important to that particular walk, but also some other ones that are of meaning to us. And there's lots of little detail in the painting that is very significant to us, and it kind of reflected the relationship that we had, the experience that we had shared together. The point being that this is not a bunch of purple and green stripes, right? There's so much more to it. But we have to know the story behind it for it to have that significance. And that's true, I think, of just about all art, right? Art reflects a story of some kind. And we have to bear that in mind when we make comments about art, because we might think, oh, that's rubbish. Or we might think, well, it doesn't do anything for me. But that's because we don't get the story behind it. And it's always interesting, I think, to hear artists of all sorts, musicians, painters, sculptors, writers, describe some of the context to what caused them to write that particular piece of art. We've all probably got things like this, right? We have things in our lives, in our homes, that reflect a story, that represent something, mementos of something. I mean, maybe a vacation, but also we have things that are precious to us because they reflect a particular part of our life or a particular storyline in our lives. Like, Lisa, my wife, has a paper mache anteater that I bought her. Right? It's the most bizarre-looking thing, I think you would have to say, wouldn't you? And our kids kind of laugh at it. But it's the first gift I ever bought her. So it's a great pickup thing. If you buy people paper mache anteaters, they just fall in love with you. It's amazing. But and we were walking past this store, and she saw it, she liked it, and I went and bought it. But it has huge significance. So I know if Lisa ever throws that out, that's the beginning of the end for us, right? Because it means so much. It really means so much. So we have these very personal things that reflect something much bigger, something much deeper, something much more beautiful than could fully be expressed in a work of art or in a memento or in whatever it is. And I think that that's true of our lives as well, right? Our lives, we could look at our lives like, well, my life's just a bunch of purple and green stripes. Or we could say, my life is a story. It's an incredible story. And all of our lives are stories, right? And there's parts to our stories that are really difficult and maybe we don't tell them much. We don't tell that story much. Or maybe we even want to deny that part of our story, or we can't even see how any good could have come out of that part of our story. There's other parts of our story where we think, well, that was amazing. I mean, it was really exciting or life-changing. It was invigorating. Other parts of our stories that are neither one of those, they're just boring. Probably most of the time, right? I mean, most of our lives are probably pretty standard. And then a few bad things happen, a few good things happen. I mean, that's probably the way things are. But whatever it is, it's us. It's our story. It's not just a bunch of green and purple stripes. It's who we are. And Paul, the early church leader, he got at this issue when he wrote to the church in Corinth. It's in the second letter that he wrote them. It actually might be the third, because he refers to another letter that nobody's ever found. But in the second letter that we have recorded, he says this. Maybe we can just show that scripture. He's writing to them. He says, "Your lives are a letter." So he's talking about literature here as an art form. Your lives are a letter that anyone can read by just looking at you. Christ himself wrote it, not with ink, but with God's living spirit, not chiseled into stone, but carved into human lives. So what Paul seems to be saying here is, God is at work in your life. I mean, I believe God is at work in our lives, in everybody's life. We may not choose to call it God, and we will have different language for this, but God's Spirit, the Spirit of God is at work in all our lives. And shaping us, when we give permission for that to happen, comforting us, helping us, carrying us through things. Maybe God is present even in the situations where we perhaps, as we look back, wish God wasn't there or wish God would turn away. Or maybe God was present in the situations where we can't imagine, if God was present, what was God doing? I mean, there's lots of mystery in this whole issue of our stories and our lives and the ups and downs of our lives. But Paul seems to be saying that God is at work in our lives, and our stories are the product of that. And rather than being ashamed of them, or rather than hiding them away, maybe we could see our stories in a different kind of way. Perhaps we could, and I guess this is somewhat of a review in some respects of what we've been looking at over these past few weeks. Maybe a big factor for us is accepting our story that we'd want to change. There may be things about a story that to us just a bunch of purple and green stripes. But rather, look at ourselves and say, okay, I'm a work of art. I'm unique. I'm who I am today. And there is nobody else like me on the planet. And I have this potential to be me. To be who I am. And those difficult times have shaped me. Those good times have shaped me. And God is with me. And the miracle, the beauty of incarnation, of God coming into human life, is this great affirmation of who we are as human beings. God accepting us right where we are, who we are, our whole story, and saying, okay, I'm with you, I'm in your story, you're in my story, as Paul seems to be articulating here. So can we accept ourselves at that level? I guess that goes on then for us to then ask the question, can we see other people in a different kind of way? Like, are the people that we see and view as just a bunch of green and purple stripes more than that? I mean, everybody has a story, right? Everybody is a product of something. Even the people we find most annoying, most irritating, have a story behind them. Could we become intrigued with the work of art that those people are? Could we begin to see with different eyes? Could we begin to listen in a different way, such that story would emerge, that we would hear and see people in a different kind of way. Could we, in fact, I guess, by listening to people, by accepting other people, by seeing other people in a different way, thereby affirm in them that God loves them, that God is present in their lives, that they count, that they matter, that they can be accepted. Maybe those people, the people we're talking about here, are carrying all kinds of regrets and shame and wondering if they can ever really get over what's happened in their lives already in order to live the future. As we invite people into our lives, as we share our lives, and as a work of art, as something of beauty, not in a proud way, but just by saying, I'm not ashamed. This is me, and invite people into that. We are thereby inviting people to share their story and letting them be who they really are. And I want us just to briefly look at this, the scripture, the larger context of the scripture that the one I just mentioned comes from. Okay, so it comes from the third chapter of the second letter to the Corinthians. And in the beginning of this letter, Paul, the early church leader, is trying to kind of prove his point. He almost comes across as a little insecure. He's trying to explain why he's legit. And here's how he explains it, though. He says, does it sound like we're patting ourselves on the back, insisting on our credentials, asserting our authority? Because he's had influence in these people's lives, and some people are questioning the legitimacy of that. He says, well, we're not. Neither do we need letters of endorsement, either to you or from you. You yourselves are all the endorsement we need. Your very lives are a letter that anyone can read by just looking at you. Christ himself wrote it, not with ink, but with God's living Spirit, not chiseled into stone, but carved into human lives. And we publish it. We couldn't be more sure of ourselves than this, that you, written by Christ himself for God, are our letter of recommendation. We wouldn't think of writing this kind of letter about ourselves. Only God can write such a letter. His letter authorizes us to help carry out this new plan of action. The plan wasn't written out with ink on paper, with pages and pages of legal footnotes, killing the spirit. It's written with spirit on spirit, his life on our lives. So I think what he's saying there is this. He's saying, look, if you want some kind of recommendation, if you want sort of proof of my legitimacy, you are the proof. He's saying to these people, look, we've partnered together, we've worked together, we've influenced one another's lives. I mean, he's certainly saying he's had an influence on their lives. I think by inference he's saying those people have had an influence on him too. And he's saying, look, your lives have changed because of our stories coming together. Your story is different. This letter, this text that's being written out is different as a result of our interaction. That's his letter of recommendation. Those are his credentials. In other words, what he's saying, I think, and to me this is really core to what it means to follow Jesus. He's saying that at the heart of his action, he talks about action, and his plan of action is sharing his life with other people. In other words, this way of Jesus isn't transmitted by written documents. It's not transmitted by theoretical arguments. It's not transmitted by doctrine or dogma. It's transmitted by life on life, spirit on spirit. It's transmitted through relationships. In other words, it's not about so much of a head thing as it is a heart thing. It's through life change and our interaction with people that we are different. We're going to celebrate communion in a moment. It's kind of behind the picture. We're going to celebrate communion in a moment. And that's one of those, I think, incredible celebrations where we're going to celebrate it right now in 2014. We're remembering something that was celebrated over 2,000 years ago, where Jesus broke bread and he kind of took this Passover festival and imbued it with different, full of meaning, and passed the bread out and the wine to his followers. And then they started doing that, we do it every week here. I don't think there's anything magical about it every week, but different followers of Jesus do it at different frequency. But it's been done down through the centuries, and so it's kind of like being passed on to us. There's this relational connection all the way down from Jesus. Just as you could say, we're probably here because of somebody or people who have had influence on our lives, right? We didn't just show up. I mean, maybe for some of us that was the case. But most likely, the reason we showed up is because we've been thinking about things, and that was because of conversations with other people, right? It's down to relationships that we are here right now. And it was relationships that affected the people that affected us, and it was other relationships that affected those people, all the way back to the earliest followers of Jesus, and Jesus relationally impacting those people's lives. Now, there's been writing, and there's been all sorts of doctrine and different things passed down through the ages, but I'm not aware of anybody whose life has necessarily been fundamentally transformed because of doctrine. I mean, most of the time we're having to sort of puzzle through doctrine, right? Well, how does that work out? You know, all those kind of things. It's through relationships, it's through connection that's I think what draws us in. It's through people walking through tough times with us. It's through people sharing their own lives with us. And so I guess as we come to the end of this series, we're taking this challenge to say, okay, what's our highest calling? What's our highest goal? What are we in this for, if you like? We could think about that. What are we in life for? You know, what do we want out of life? And think about it as followers of Jesus. What do we really want? And Paul here seems to be saying, okay, my highest goal, my highest accomplishment is you. It's the relationships. It's the connection. It's the people that he's been in partnership with, the people he's been in relationship with. And I guess we can ask ourselves that same question. I mean, is that our goal? I mean, as we think about being a follower of Jesus, as we think about our vision, which I think is what being a follower of Jesus means, to be change agents in the world, right? To be agents of love, peace, and hope. To be people who will bring light and love into the world and see change as a result of that. It's going to happen through relationships. I mean, to what degree are we prepared to invest our lives in one another? Now, as we said right at the beginning of the series, we can't do that with everybody. We can't be really close and really intense with everybody. And in the material this week, it's sort of concluding material where we're asked to reflect back on what has particularly challenged us over the last few weeks. There's an opportunity this week to think through, okay, what am I going to do? What step can I take? It would be ridiculous to think that we could have, I think, 100 intense relationships, probably even 20 intense relationships, probably 10 is too much, right? I mean, the kind of close relationships that we've been talking about. But we can take a step closer to one person. We can open up a little more in one context. We can invite one other person to share their story more, or maybe pick up on the tip of the iceberg that we were talking about last week, where they share something and we ask a further question. Or we can see somebody as more than green and purple stripes. And begin to be intrigued with certain people where we want to just get closer and know people more. And as a result, share with them the level to which God loves us and the level to which God loves them. We're really inviting people into the acceptance of God. We're inviting, by listening to people, we're saying, you are loved and accepted. God loves you. It's like flowing in a stream where we might feel we don't have permission to swim. It's an invitation into something refreshing, an invitation into something beautiful. It happens over time, it doesn't happen quickly. But the question is, what are we going to do with our space and with our time? We are all products of space and time. Our stories, this story reflected here, was about time in a certain space. Our lives are the products of time in certain spaces. And as we look forward now, we can't change the past. As we look forward, we can think about our use of time and our use of space, where we live, what and who we're close to, what time we invest in relationships, and and the time we choose to invest in relationships. Because these things do take time. They're time intensive. I think we all realize that. And time is probably our scarcest commodity, right? I mean, it's also our most precious, our most precious commodity, because it's one of those things that we don't get back. right? Time is something we don't get back. Once time is gone, we can't go back to it. We can lose money and get money back and earn money. Money comes and goes, right? We've all probably experienced some of that. But with time, it's really, really precious. So in the material this week, there's some reflections that help us really get at that issue and think through, okay, what are we going to do differently as a result of going through this series, as a result of thinking about some of these things? Can we be people that open up a way through others, for others, through just being vulnerable with our own lives? Isn't it amazing? I think it's amazing to think that it might even be the case that all God is asking of us, all God is asking of the human race, if you like, is to be real, to be honest, to be loving, to be open, to share something vulnerable, to say to others, here's my life, here am I, and invite others to do the same. It's not rocket science, it's not about power, it's not about great wisdom, it's not about the strong and the weak, it's just about all of us being real. And we all have a story to tell. Some of those stories are difficult and painful. Some of them some parts of them appear way more beautiful to us. But we all have a story to tell. We all have something to share. The things that you may feel have crippled you, or things that you may feel have been your worst enemy throughout life, could actually be the things that unlock pain for other people, that give them a chance to express their own pain, their own difficulty. None of us, right now, can do anything about our past. It just is. But we can move forward differently. And that's the call, I think, that Paul in these scriptures is making to us, that Jesus is making to us. I'm going to move this out of the way. And we're going to have communion together. Communion, as I say, is something we've celebrated down through the ages, something very, very ancient. And it's, I think also, it's a reflection of Jesus sharing himself with us. Like Jesus gathered his early followers and he said, look, my story is one of transformation. I want to share my life with the world. I want to change the world. And he invited us at communion into that. He says, here's my life. Take it. My bread is like my body. The bread is like my body. The wine is like my blood. The blood represents forgiveness. In other words, it represents acceptance. The bread represents the very essence of God, if you like. Jesus sharing himself with us. And we sort of come to this table and we participate in the story. Just like, I think of the story in that painting. We've shared that many times round a table over food. We come together and we share stories, don't we? That's what happens when we eat. And we somehow become more part of one another's lives. That's what's happening with communion. We have this incredible, mysterious opportunity to be part of God's story. So we're going to take communion. Jesus took bread and broke it. He said, this is my body broken for you. And he took the wine and he said, this is my blood shed for you. This